Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. And today's range report is on the Kahr CW45. Now this is a very budget-friendly single stack 45 polymer striker fired handgun from Kahr Arms. I kind of believe that this is the poor man's version of the Glock 36, which of course is Glock's single stack 45 handgun. I really haven't seen one of those in the wild in some time. I used to own one, but I know it's still in their catalog. Now, I looked this up. I believe this gun is still in production. And everywhere that I can find online that these are for sale, they're going for a pretty good price. So I know in the past these have been relatively popular. Many times very affordable guns can kind of gain some type of cult following. While I don't know if this particular gun does have that, I know many other guns in this price point do. So this is the first time I've ever gotten my hands on a Kahr Arms pistol. I'm kind of excited to get to try it out. Now this pistol is on loan to the channel from my good friend Jack once again. I know, everyone's so thankful to him and they keep saying, is he some type of crazy gun collector? Well, he's not crazy, but he definitely is a collector, and I'm very humbled and honored that he lets me shoot the guns from his collection. And he lets me be honest, and that's what I'm going to have to do in this review. Now, being a budget-friendly gun, that does not necessarily mean I intentionally am going to rag on this just because of its price point. I know sometimes I am told that I'm kind of a gun snob. Maybe I am, I don't know, but I like to give every gun a chance. And so when I get these guns here on the table, and before I take them to the range, I like to get my initial thoughts and impressions from just handling them. I like to decide what do I like and not like about it, and maybe that will affect what happens at the range. And I always like to start these videos with something positive. Now, that's where I don't really have much to say about this gun. The only two things about this gun that I really like is the fact that it is a two-tone gun. I'm a big fan of two-tone guns. I think that having guns of multiple colors, there's just something that is kind of attractive about that. So I do like the finish of the slide, the silver slide versus the black polymer frame. And I do have to say that the controls of this gun, while very simplistic, you only have a magazine release and a slide stop. They are easily reachable by your thumb. They're very easy to activate. There's no problem there. So I give it some high marks when it comes to the controls and the manual of arms. But now let's talk about the things I don't like about this pistol. And yeah, there's kind of a lot of them. First and foremost, I don't like the capacity of this gun. This gun is only 6+1. I definitely think in today's marketplace, even with 45s, we have many more options out there that are very small and can provide you with much more capacity. Only having 6 rounds in these magazines, making this gun 6+1, I don't think really is very formidable. And it's probably why, as I mentioned, I haven't seen a Glock 36 in some time. Well, it's probably because of the capacity. Another thing I don't like about this is the grip texture. Very much it is like the Glock Generation 2, so you kind of have some very light pebbling here on the sides and a little bit of checkering on the front strap and the back strap. Let me see if I can get this into focus here. And so I don't really feel like on a gun that's chambered in 45 and is so small, you're really going to have a lot of grippy surface, a lot of purchase on this. So I'm kind of concerned about that. But as for the aesthetics, I know I said I like the two-tone color of this. I don't like the necessarily blocky design of it. To me, it's a very plain looking gun, and yes, it is a budget-friendly gun. I totally understand that. So they're probably not going to take a lot of time milling out a slide, making it look very tactical. Also, we have to deal with the sights. Now the sights on this is a 2-dot system, so you do have a channel here in the back, but there's only a single dot in the center of the rear sight. You have your single dot in the front, but I prefer the 3-dot system. So let me see if I can get that in focus. There you go, right there. Hopefully I can get it in focus. I'm dealing with this new camera here. Got to learn all the different focus options. And then last but not least, the elephant in the room when it comes to this gun. and that's going to be the trigger. Now, dry firing it here on the bench. Of course, let me safety check the gun, visually inspect the chamber, and dry fire this. And let me tell you, this trigger is horrendous. Now, I recently reviewed another gun, and I said that was the worst striker fired trigger I have ever felt. Well, this one is going to give it a run for its money. Now, this being a striker fired gun, technically in a legal sense, this is a double action only trigger, just like Glocks. But the trigger pull on this is extremely long and extremely heavy, and there is no wall. You just keep pulling that trigger back and it kind of surprises you. I'm not sure what the reasoning is for the design of this trigger, or if it's just something that they threw together, or if it's designed that way on purpose. I would definitely say that the trigger weight on this is probably around 7 to 7.5 pounds. You really just cannot get a good trigger on this. And that, for me, just here on the bench, is going to be this gun's biggest downside. But I'm going to get this thing to the range, and because of the small magazine capacity, and unfortunately I only have one magazine for this review, many times when I show the shooting portions I'm going to put two back to back because I have to reload the magazine. So these are going to be my first shots at 7 yards. I'm going to load 2 magazines and show you my initial groupings and give you my initial thoughts.
Are you loaded all the way?
I have not loaded it all the way yet.
It gets harder at the bottom.
Yeah.
All right, so the grouping wasn't that bad, especially for a budget handgun that's probably going to be bought for just self-defense and defending the home. This is definitely not some type of race gun or range gun. It is designed for concealed carry and designed for home defense. So I'm pretty happy with the group despite this terrible trigger, and shooting it at the range, the trigger is even worse than dry firing it. The biggest problem I have with it is that I can't really tell where it's going to break. It just surprises you every single time. Something else I discovered is that the point of the rear of the frame here, now for me, I'm right-handed, the point here is protruding out just a little bit more than it typically does on a standard handgun when it comes to the beaver tail area, and I find that it really digs in to my thumb a little bit when I'm shooting, and the recoil impulse of this kind of dug it into my knuckle here. So I think ergonomically that would need to get addressed, and if that bothers me and something that I've never really experienced on any other handgun, I think other people might find that issue to be relevant as well. So if this was my handgun, I may have to file that point down, and even just touching it right here, it is a pretty sharp point. That kind of dug into my thumb a little bit, as I mentioned. All right, so I had a pretty decent group at 7 yards. I'm now going to go to what I refer to as the accuracy portion, but remember, I'm not a trick shot, I'm not an expert shooter, I'm just an average gun guy and collector. And so this portion of the range report, I like to put the target out about double the distance, sometimes between 12 and 14 yards, and see how big my group opens up. Now on this gun, I'm expecting it to get pretty big. With this horrible trigger, I don't think I'm going to be very successful. Both of these are going to be at 12 yards with 6 rounds apiece, and I'm going for the head on these silhouette targets. So let's see how I do.
Time I woke up, like 9 o'clock the next morning. saw it appear on Wednesday.
Somebody's got me out there just jacking. Hey, I know I got the gun came in yesterday. The guy's like, that's 48 hours to get it. I hung up the phone. 15 minutes. Same guy called back.
Hey, your gun's ready if you want to pick it up.
What the dick? Yeah. Make it big gun, right? That's pretty good. Yeah, he's fun.
Yeah.
His hands are still safe.
They tell you what.
All right, so I have to say the grouping wasn't too bad. It definitely opened up a lot, which is what I would expect on this particular trigger that I think is pretty terrible. When it comes to shooting very heavy double action triggers, I can tell you that the problems I have personally with accuracy get pretty big at distance. So once I start to get beyond 10 yards, double action is definitely not my friend. Now, one of the other things I noticed from shooting this is that this gun likes to throw the brass really far. In fact, my wife, who is the camera woman through most of this, noticed that the shells were hitting her and the camera as I was shooting it, and she was standing pretty far back. She even had to adjust where she was standing. So this thing definitely likes to expel that brass. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. It just kind of depends on how you're shooting and I guess the situation that you're in. But now, speaking of my wife, I want to give her a shot at this. I don't think she's going to like this very much. If I don't like the gun, she's probably not going to like it either. Now, one of the things you will notice that you never really get to see in the other videos where she's shooting is that she is left eye dominant. She is right-handed, but left eye dominant. Normally, I'm always filming her from behind. This time, I'm gonna set the camera out in front of her so we can see how the gun reacts in her hand and the recoil impulse. And I always like to get her perspective. She's a very different type of shooter than I am. And I know that many guns like this are gonna be marketed to women, people that are concealed carrying. And so to get her perspective sometimes is very enlightening just because she's so different than I am. But I'm going to give her a shot and see what she thinks. All right, so she told me right after shooting it that she's done. Just one magazine was enough for her to know she does not like this gun. It had a lot of recoil for her. Now, yes, it is a 45. She's used to 9mm, and she's not as an avid shooter as I am. I'm used to this type of recoil. She is not. So I think if you are somebody that is not a big-time shooter, you might not like this, especially if you're going to be recoil sensitive or want a gun that's not going to flip too much on you. Having 45 ACP and a little polymer gun like this, well, you got to expect some muzzle flip. It's just part of the nature of the beast. There's nothing wrong with it, you just have to be expecting it. The other thing she said she didn't like was the unpredictability of the break of the trigger. When you pull the trigger, you just have to have a nice even pull back. You're not going to feel a wall and the gun just goes bang. It's kind of weird personally. I really don't like this, but maybe it's something that I could overcome if I owned this gun and shot with it more. And maybe it's designed that way, as I said, because it's a concealed carry gun and that they want a really heavy double action trigger. Just like if you're going to shoot a double action only revolver, you have to really want this gun to go off. And so since there's no manual safety, the safety really is a really long double action pull. And speaking of carrying it concealed, the last video I'm going to show you here is me trying to see if this gun can actually shoot fast. I'm not sure if it can with this really long trigger, so I'm going to load up one more magazine and I'm going to see if I can actually shoot this thing fast, because in a self-defense scenario, you might have to. Alright, so I can actually shoot this thing pretty fast. I wish I had another magazine to try to see what a magazine change in this thing would be like. I think it would actually be kind of hard. There's no flare to the mag well, it's pretty narrow, and these single stack mags are pretty thin, so you gotta be very exact where you insert that magazine. That might slow you down just a little bit. So what are my final thoughts on the CW45 by Kahr Arms? Well, it does have a few positive things about it. Now, my experience at the range, I had no failures to feed, no failures to fire. I had no hiccups whatsoever. This gun really ran like a top, had no issues at all. So I have to give it some points for that. The gun might not be enjoyable for me to shoot. I can absolutely hate the trigger. It can dig into my hand, but I can't fault it as a junky gun. Now, I think if this trigger was better, this thing would actually be pretty accurate. I kind of felt that the gun was shooting where I was pointing it. I just could not predict where the trigger would break. So if this thing had a trigger more like a Glock or a Smith & Wesson M&P or a Springfield XD, I actually think it'd be a pretty darn strong contender, especially at the price point. And I understand why some people would want a gun like this. It's extremely affordable. Now, looking online right now when I'm filming this, I saw a few in the low 300s brand new. So that's a pretty darn good price for what I think is a pretty well-constructed gun. Now, I don't really see any defects with its manufacturing. It's pretty blocky, as I said, but the machine marks are to a minimum. The gun seems to be pretty solid. It's not rattly. It seems to be made of good polymer and good steel, so I can't fault it for that either. It's just not a looker. I think as the joke goes, it's kind of like a hooker with a peg leg and an eye patch. It might not look like much, but it gets the job done. And that's kind of the way that this gun works. It functions, but it's not enjoyable to shoot, and I think there's definitely better options out there for you. But my recommendation personally would be to save your money, get a few $100 more, and get a Glock 36. I think you will enjoy shooting that much more if you want a single stack 45 compact or subcompact pistol. But you can't complain with the results. It does work. I don't enjoy shooting it, but I think it would work if it's just what you're gonna buy it for is for a home defense gun. You don't care about collecting. You don't care about going to the range that often, which, by the way, you should if you do own a gun. You need to train with your guns. But if you're just looking for a home defense gun and you're gonna go to the range once, twice, or maybe 3 times a year, I think it would be functional. So, how would I rate this on my star system? Well, it was not a pleasurable gun to shoot. It had a lot of muzzle flip for me. I don't like the aesthetics. The trigger is absolutely horrible, but it ran. It ran well. So I'm going to have to give this thing a 2.5 stars out of 5. Emotionally, I want to give it 2 stars out of 5, just because I don't like it that much. But I have to give it credit for running reliable. You know, not a lot of guns out there, especially in the more affordable class of guns, can say that. This one just seems to run, but I don't like shooting it. So 2.5 stars out of 5. The trigger is horrible. You will not be very accurate with it, but I think for close-up, home defense, and concealed carry, it would be fine. But definitely go and train with this. So, this is my range report on the Kahr CW45. What do you guys think? Do you own any guns by Kahr? What do you think about the CW45 if you happen to own one? I would love to know if your experiences echo mine. So let me know in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.